The Middle Age, a time of chivalry and feudalism, evoking a sense of wonders. What musings of curiosities have you known about this time in human history? It's a time in history that often gets misunderstood by non-historians. But fear not! Get ready to be blown away by these 15 mind-blowing true facts about the Middle Ages that will challenge everything you thought you knew about this charismatic era. Number 15. The Chivalrous Knight. In the midst of rampant violence and civilian casualties, chivalry emerged as an attempt to establish rules of conduct for knights. While these rules occasionally emphasized benevolence towards the less fortunate, they primarily served the interests of the elite. The development of chivalry coincided with the rise of knights, heavily armored warriors from privileged backgrounds. The practice of knighthood began around the Norman conquest of England in the year 1066. The term chivalry was derived from the medieval Latin word caballarius, meaning horseman. Originally, knights were far from honorable figures. They were essentially hired thugs equipped with horses and armor akin to heavy tanks. These warriors served under warlords, rewarded with land or the freedom to pillage and plunder villages during battles, subjecting the inhabitants to looting, harassment, and arson. However, as the Middle Ages progressed, there emerged a realization that knights needed a professional code to earn respect and maintain a sense of respectability. Church councils in the early Middle Ages even prayed to be spared from knights' destructive actions. Defining what it meant to be a good knight was never a common decision. Commanders established rules that revolved around practical military needs, such as bravery in battle and loyalty to one's lord and comrades. Chivalric culture encouraged knights to develop their own moral standards, but these ideas of honor and good behavior primarily focused on the noble class. The concerns of knights often overshadowed the plight of the poor. Acts of burning, looting, and other ill behaviors were not explicitly discouraged in many medieval texts describing chivalry. This selective morality persisted during the 100 Years' War between England and France, when widespread devastation occurred and the countryside suffered the consequences. The contemporary understanding of chivalry as a code of proper masculine behavior, especially concerning women, had little to do with the reality of knights in the Middle Ages. Instead, it was European neo-romantics in the late 19th century who adapted the concept of chivalry to define an idealized form of male conduct. The true impact of chivalry during the Middle Ages remains unclear. While honor and codes of conduct were emphasized, it is challenging to determine how effectively they curbed knights' aggression. Number 14. 100 Years' War. The 100 Years' War, known as the Guerre de Cent Ans in French, was a protracted series of armed conflicts that took place between the kingdoms of England and France during the late Middle Ages. The war, which spanned from 1337 to 1453, had its roots in English claims to the French throne. It evolved into a broader power struggle that drew in various factions from across Western Europe, fueled by the emergence of nationalism on both sides. The duration of the war, despite its name, extended beyond a century and was marked by intermittent periods of truces. It was a complex and multifaceted conflict that had a profound and lasting impact on European history. 5 generations of kings from 2 rival dynasties clashed in their quest for control over the French throne, which was regarded as a symbol of dominance in Western Europe during that era. Moreover, the war fueled the growth of national identities in both England and France. As the conflict progressed, a sense of national unity and pride took root, leading to more centralized governance structures in both countries. This gradual centralization, coupled with shifts in political and economic dynamics, contributed to the rise of England and France as formidable global powers in subsequent centuries. Historians have categorized the 100 Years' War into 3 distinct phases, each separated by periods of truce. The first phase, known as the Edwardian War, saw initial English successes under the leadership of Edward III. In the second phase, Caroline witnessed renewed French resistance and counter-offensives led by figures like Bertrand du Guesclin. The final phase, the Lancastrian War, saw England's King Henry V achieve significant victories, including the famous Battle of Agincourt, but ultimately ended with the French forces, under the leadership of Joan of Arc, reclaiming control over most of their territory. This historic war was not a continuous series of battles, but rather a series of campaigns, sieges, and diplomatic maneuvers that shaped the political, social, and cultural landscape of Europe during the late Middle Ages. Number 13. Trial by combat. Trial by combat was a very interesting practice that became increasingly uncommon towards the close of the Middle Ages. It has continued to be a part of legal theory and practice during the Renaissance. In this unusual form of justice, known as judicial duels, individuals would engage in combat to settle disputes when there was a lack of overwhelming evidence. It was a means to ensure impartiality, especially in cases of treason where judges acted as agents of the king, who was the offended party. Interestingly, not everyone was exempt from participating in these duels. Clergymen, for instance, enjoyed immunity, but women were not among the exempted individuals. Consequently, there were instances where women themselves stepped into the arena of combat. In 1467, a notable figure named Hans Talhofer penned his Fecht book, a comprehensive fencing manual that provided illustrated instructions on how to engage in duels with a wide array of weapons. Within its pages, there was a section dedicated to combat between men and women. While such duels became increasingly rare in Germany after the 13th century, several illustrations allude to their occurrence. Talhofer's depiction of these duels follows a common setup, although it was not universally adopted. Interestingly, it seems that such duels were most commonly fought between husband and wife, possibly because it was easier for a wife to find a champion in such circumstances. Talhofer presents his instructions without any particular bias, and his advice applies to both male and female combatants. He provides two versions of a fight, one where the man emerges victorious and another where the woman prevails. It may come as a surprise, but divorce is not solely a modern phenomenon. Historical evidence suggests that settling marital differences through martial combat was, in fact, a common practice. In many cases, it proved to be a more cost-effective solution than hiring a marriage counselor, as unconventional as it may seem. It is worth noting that Talhofer also served as an advisor on judicial duels at court, adding to his expertise in this fascinating field. Number 12. Gothic castles and architecture. The fascinating Gothic architecture and art of the medieval became a breathtaking style that has left an indelible mark on Europe for centuries. Its hovered towering cathedrals reached towards the heavens, ornate sculptures adorned majestic facades, and stained glass windows transformed sunlight into a kaleidoscope of colors. This is the realm of the Gothic. Originating in France, the Gothic style was initially known as French work and found favor with the Roman Catholic Church, which employed it extensively. It was a dramatic departure from the earlier Romanesque style, characterized by its arches, vaulted ceilings, and smaller stained glass windows. Gothic architecture took these elements and pushed them to new heights, quite literally. Imagine soaring buildings with high ceilings, intricate aesthetics, and expansive walls. The architects of the time employed engineering advancements to create grand structures that seemed to defy gravity. Flying buttresses, rib vaults, and the iconic pointed arches, also known as Gothic arches, supported these towering edifices and flooded their interiors with ethereal light. The Basilica Church of Saint Denis, often hailed as the first genuine Gothic building, marked a turning point in the Romanesque era. Its pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses set the stage for the magnificent cathedrals that would follow. Gothic cathedrals became the pride of their cities, their spires reaching toward the heavens and serving as beacons of faith. These architectural marvels boasted tall towers that dominated the skyline, while their exteriors were adorned with intricate sculptures and biblical scenes. The Basilica of Saint Denis and Notre Dame de Paris exemplified the trend of twin towers on the west facade, while Italian Gothic churches often featured separate towers. Structural innovations, such as ribbed vaults and flying buttresses, played a vital role in supporting the height and weight of Gothic structures. Ribbed vaults intersected with parallel barrel vaults, providing stability for the lofty roofs. Meanwhile, flying buttresses served as formidable reinforcements, allowing for slender walls and expansive windows. Number 11. The Black Death of the 14th century. In the darkest corners of medieval Europe, a merciless and deadly plague called the Black Death emerged. From 1347 to 1352, this devastating pandemic swept through the land, leaving behind destruction and despair. It caused an estimated 25 to 30 million deaths and forever changed history. But where did this deadly plague come from? The Black Death originated in Central Asia and traveled with Mongol warriors and traders to the Crimean Peninsula. It then made its way to Europe, possibly on Genoese trading ships from the Black Sea. The disease was carried by fleas on rodents, spreading the deadly Yersinia pestis bacteria to unsuspecting victims. The name Black Death evoked fear among those who survived. It earned this name because it turned the skin and sores black and caused high fever and excruciating joint pains. The toll was staggering, with 30% to 50% of the affected population losing their lives. The consequences reverberated throughout European society, leading to the end of serfdom, questioning of authority, and the abandonment of towns and villages. Medieval doctors were helpless against this invisible enemy. They didn't know about the microscopic bacteria causing the plague. Fleas on rodents, especially brown rats, unknowingly carried the disease, and human parasites like lice might have also played a role. People faced overwhelming death tolls, carts filled with bodies, and a lack of understanding about how to stop the spread. By 1352, the Black Death had run its course, but its impact remained. It resurfaced in smaller outbreaks throughout the medieval period, leaving Europe scarred and traumatized. Some cities escaped its grasp, while others were devastated. The exact number of deaths is uncertain, but it is believed that 25 to 30 million lives were lost. It took over 2 centuries for Europe to recover its former population levels. The Black Death serves as a chilling reminder of how fragile human existence is and the catastrophic consequences of a relentless pandemic. Its legacy endures as a testament to the resilience of those who survived and the profound societal changes it brought about. Number 10. The Dancing Plague of 1518. The Dancing Plague of 1518 was a strange event that took place in Strasbourg, France. It started when a woman named Frau Trophea began dancing fervently in the streets and continued dancing for a week. Soon, others joined her, and by August, around 400 people were affected by this strange dancing phenomenon. Some people even died from exhaustion or heart attacks while dancing. The cause of this outbreak remains a mystery, but there are several theories. One theory suggests that it was a case of stress-induced mass hysteria, as the region was facing difficult times with famine and disease. Another theory proposes that it might have been caused by food poisoning from a fungus called ergot, which grows on grains used for making bread. Whatever the cause, the dancing eventually subsided when the dancers were sent to a shrine to pray for forgiveness. Similar cases of dancing mania occurred in other places during the medieval period. Number 9. The Great Famine. We travel back in time to the 14th century, when Europe was plunged into an era of darkness and despair. The heavens seemed to conspire against humanity, unleashing a series of calamities that pushed the continent to the brink of collapse. It all began in 1314 and 1315 when the bountiful fields of Europe failed to yield their precious harvest. The crops withered, the fields lay barren, and hunger swept the land like a merciless plague. But this was no ordinary famine. The population had swelled in the preceding years, fueled by an agricultural boom. Suddenly, there was not enough food to sustain the masses, and starvation loomed on the horizon. The Great Famine was a harrowing precursor to the Black Death, the devastating bubonic plague that would ravage Europe in the years to come. However, the famine's impact was not limited to immediate death and despair. Its long-lasting effects were felt in the weakened immune systems of those who survived, rendering them more vulnerable to the plague's deadly grip when it inevitably arrived. But what caused this catastrophic famine? It was intertwined with a climatic shift known as the Medieval Climate Anomaly (MCA). During this period, the world experienced dramatic fluctuations in temperature and precipitation. Parts of North America, Europe, and Asia basked in a warm embrace, while South America and Australia faced their own heat wave. The tropical Pacific cooled, altering hydrologic cycles across the globe. The warmer temperatures during the MCA allowed farmers to cultivate previously inhospitable lands, leading to a surplus of crops that fueled a population explosion. However, this golden age of abundance came crashing down as the Little Ice Age descended upon the Northern Hemisphere in the 1300s. Cold weather and torrential rains ravaged Europe, decimating crops and spreading disease among livestock. The once flourishing fields turned into rotting wastelands, further worsening the famine's grip. As the landowners of medieval Europe watched their domains crumble and revenues plummet, the social fabric of society began to unravel. Lands were sold at drastically reduced prices, and institutions such as monasteries struggled to survive. Desperation filled the air as even the sacred relics of Canterbury Cathedral Priory were sold to raise funds. This famine was a dark chapter in Europe's history. a relentless assault on the very foundations of civilization. It left scars that would take generations to heal, weakening communities and leaving them vulnerable to the horrors of the Black Death. It serves as a stark reminder that in the face of nature's wrath, humanity must rally together to overcome the darkest of times. Number 8. Powerful women in leadership. People believed that women in the medieval age were usually oppressed and subservient. But while this is largely true, some women defied those expectations and held positions of power.
We're ready to give him such a bite he'll wish he'd kept his hands and his...
In the church, women called abbesses could have important roles in convents, and some even had authority over monks. Outside of religious settings, women could also have political power. Queens and regents, like Queen Isabella of England, could rule on behalf of absent husbands or young sons. Here are a few other notable women from medieval times who exercised their power and influence in different ways. One was Theodora, an influential woman in Byzantine history. Another was Amalasuntha, a regent queen of the Ostrogoths, whose murder led to conflict with the Byzantine Empire. There was also Brunhilde, a Visigoth princess, who married a Frankish king and waged war against a rival kingdom to avenge her sister's murder. Then there's the remarkable Fredegund, who rose from servant to queen consort and ruled as regent for her son. She was known for her ruthless actions, including assassinations. Finally, there's Empress Suiko, the first recorded empress to rule Japan. Her reign saw the promotion of Buddhism and increased influence from China and Korea. These women challenged the notion that men always ruled during medieval times, and they left their mark on history through their actions and influence. Number 7. Trade routes. Let's talk about the bustling medieval world of trade and commerce, where even the smallest communities had access to vibrant weekly markets and, just a day's journey away, awaited grand fairs that offered a tantalizing array of goods. While international trade had been around since the days of the Roman Empire, it was the advancements in transportation, banking, and the economic growth of Northern Europe that triggered a remarkable boom starting from the 9th century CE. The Venetians, fueled by the spirit of the Crusades, expanded their trade interests to encompass the Byzantine Empire and the exotic lands of the Levant. And behold, new financial instruments emerged, empowering even modest investors to fund the daring trade expeditions that traversed the length and breadth of Europe, both by sea and land. But let's not forget the adventurous Vikings of the 10th and 11th centuries CE, who not only amassed vast numbers of slaves through their raids, but also skillfully sold them off in faraway lands. With Saxony's mines as their treasure trove, silver flowed outward, while England's bountiful grain journeyed northward to Norway. Scandinavian timber and fish found their way to these shores. And then, a pivotal moment. The Norman conquest of Britain in 1066 CE redirected trade toward France and the Low Countries. English merchants eagerly imported luxurious cloth and fine wine. At the same time, cereals and the coveted wool provided the raw materials for the skilled Flemish weavers to spin their textile magic. Fast forward to the mid-14th century CE, and behold the audacity of the Italian city-states. They fearlessly engaged in trade with partners as far-flung as the Mongols. Alas, such global connections carried unintended consequences. The infamous Black Death, its peak spanning from 1347 to 1352 CE, stealthily infiltrated Europe via rats lurking aboard Italian trading ships. But undeterred by such setbacks, intrepid European pioneers, driven by religious and commercial motives, set sail in the opposite direction. It was during this era that the Portuguese discovered the enchanting Cape Verde Islands in 1462 CE, while a mere 3 decades later, Christopher Columbus charted a course to the New World, forever changing the course of history. And then, in 1497 CE, the indomitable Vasco da Gama fearlessly circumnavigated the treacherous Cape of Good Hope, ultimately reaching the shores of India. Number 6. Love and marriage. Back in the Middle Ages, relationships were often far from ideal. Married individuals frequently did not meet each other before their wedding day. Women sometimes found themselves coerced into marrying their abusers, and the church imposed strict rules on the timing, manner, and partners for canal activity. The medieval period saw the rise of courtly love, which became a dominant concept during that time. Stories, songs, and literature created for royal entertainment popularized the idea of courtly love. These tales depicted knights who were willing to make great sacrifices for honor and the love of their chosen maidens, emphasizing admiration from a distance, which often ended tragically. Interestingly, courtly love ideals provided some advantages for noble women. The concept of chivalry elevated women's status, and women could exercise authority and power in the household, particularly among the emerging class of wealthy townsfolk who possessed significant wealth and material possessions. However, these benefits only extended to women from lower social classes. Courtship was typically brief, especially among the wealthier members of society, as it often involved parental negotiations to increase family power or wealth. Young people would frequently meet their future spouses after the marriage had been arranged, and even if they did meet beforehand, their courtship was closely monitored and controlled. Among the lower classes, love was a common motive for marriage since material gain through marriage was minimal. Peasants, however, often did not marry formally, as there was little need to exchange property. Marriage was considered acceptable once puberty was reached, typically around the ages of 12 for girls and 14 for boys. Betrothals could also occur at a very young age. Although there is a romantic notion that women gained the right to propose marriage in Scotland in 1228, this is likely a fictional claim without a factual basis. The concept of courtly love, for example, was primarily a literary convention and did not necessarily reflect the actual experiences of medieval men and women in their relationships. The lives of ordinary people were shaped by social and economic factors, and marriages were often arranged for practical reasons rather than romantic love. Overall, the medieval period saw the emergence of new ideas and expressions of love, mainly through the ideals of courtly love in literature and art. These depictions continue to influence our understanding and portrayal of love in modern times, highlighting the enduring power of love as a central theme in human culture. Now, it's time for today's subscriber pick. Did you know that the women of the Middle Ages were stunningly beautiful? But here's the catch. They didn't have fancy cosmetics or access to modern showers. During this time, beauty was often associated with a fair complexion and rosy cheeks. To get this done, they used powdered lead or chalk to lighten their skin tone. So, while the Game of Thrones shows a glamorous version of that era, the reality was much tougher. But wait, could this be the only surprising truth about the Middle Ages? No, let's uncover captivating facts about this intriguing time in history. Share your favorite point in the comment section and let's unravel the secrecies together. Number 5. Great Invention of Gutenberg. One of the most captivating developments during the Middle Ages was the invention of the printing press, a mechanical device that revolutionized the way information was disseminated. Before its invention, printing was a laborious process that involved brushing or rubbing ink onto a surface repeatedly. However, the printing press, with its ability to apply pressure to an inked surface resting upon a print medium such as paper or cloth, transformed the printing industry. The printing press, as we know it today, was invented by a German goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg around 1440. Modeled on the design of existing screw presses, Gutenberg's movable-type printing press brought about what is known as the printing revolution. This innovative device could produce up to 3,600 pages per workday, a significant improvement compared to the slow and arduous process of hand printing or hand copying. Gutenberg's invention consisted of two key components: the hand mold and the movable type. The hand mold allowed for the precise and rapid creation of metal movable type in large quantities. This breakthrough made printing books and other documents much more affordable, especially for shorter print runs. The impact of Gutenberg's printing press was profound, and its influence quickly spread throughout Europe. Within a few decades, the movable-type printing press had reached over 200 cities in various European countries. By the year 1500, printing presses across Western Europe had produced more than 20 million volumes. The 6th century saw another surge in printing output, with an estimated 150 to 200 million copies being produced as the presses expanded further. Overall, the invention and global spread of the printing press during the Middle Ages had a far-reaching and transformative effect on communication, education, and the dissemination of knowledge, shaping the course of history and paving the way for the modern era of mass media. Number 4. The Fall of Constantinople. The Fall of Constantinople, which took place on May 29, 1453, marked the city's conquest by Sultan Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire. This captivating event ended the dwindling Byzantine Empire as the Ottomans breached Constantinople's ancient land wall after a 55-day siege. Mehmed surrounded the city from both land and sea, using cannons to relentlessly bombard its formidable walls. The fall of Constantinople removed a once powerful defense for Christian Europe against Muslim invasion, paving the way for uninterrupted Ottoman expansion into Eastern Europe. During the mid-15th century, the Byzantine Empire had lost much of its imperial holdings through struggles for dominance with Balkan neighbors and Roman Catholic rivals. Constantinople, once a thriving city, had suffered from devastating sieges, causing its population to dwindle from hundreds of thousands to only tens of thousands. The open fields within the city's walls were a stark contrast to its former glory. Relations between the Byzantines and the rest of Europe had soured over the centuries due to religious divisions and conflicts. Despite these tensions, it was widely recognized that Byzantine control of Constantinople served as a crucial defense against Muslim domination in the Eastern Mediterranean. Byzantine Emperor Constantine Palaeologus sought aid from major powers in Christendom to defend against the impending siege. Hungary declined to assist, and Pope Nicholas V saw the situation as an opportunity to promote the reunification of the Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. While Orthodox leaders supported the union, the people of Constantinople strongly opposed it, and riots ensued. Venice and Genoa provided military support. The Venetian Senate sent troops and galleys to Constantinople, but their arrival was delayed. Genoa dispatched soldiers led by Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, who became the commander of the land defenses. Emperor Constantine II focused on strengthening the city for the siege. The victory of Mehmed and the fall of Constantinople had far-reaching consequences for Christendom. The loss of Constantinople as a buffer against the Ottomans and the closure of access to the Black Sea left Christian kingdoms dependent on Hungary to halt further Ottoman expansion. Additionally, many scholars believe that the exodus of Greeks to Italy following the event marked the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance. Number 3. The weird medieval diet. In the shadows of the Middle Ages, there were many unusual foods and cooking techniques. Exotic meats like peacock and swan were considered delicacies. Elaborate food displays called subtleties were created, often resembling castles or mythical creatures. Unusual spices like grains of paradise were used extensively. Food in the Middle Ages was diverse and fascinating, ranging from the farms of the peasantry to the banquets of the nobility. It reflected the era's socio-economic conditions and the people's tastes, beliefs, and customs. During the Middle Ages, the diet varied depending on what could be grown, hunted, or fished locally. Feasting was prominent, especially among the nobility and royalty. These meals were elaborate events that showcased wealth, power, and status. The dishes were crafted to impress, featuring exotic ingredients, complex preparations, and ornate presentations. Geographical location greatly influenced the culinary habits of medieval Europe. In colder regions, preserving food for winter led to methods like smoking, drying, and fermenting. Nordic diets included lutefisk, pickled herring, and game meats. Mediterranean regions enjoyed fresh fruits, vegetables, and pungent ingredients like garum. The British Isles had a mix of marine and terrestrial diets, including eels and lampreys. The spice routes introduced Middle Eastern and Asian tastes to European cuisine. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and pepper became popular among the wealthy. Over the centuries, our eating habits have changed significantly. In the Middle Ages, breakfast was seen as gluttony by the church, while 2 meals a day became the norm. Snacking was common among commoners. The church advocated eating together as a household, but the rich sought privacy during meals. Number 2. The War of the Roses. The Wars of the Roses were a series of fierce civil conflicts in England that raged between 1455 and 1485. At the heart of this bloody struggle was a rivalry between 2 noble families, the House of York and the House of Lancaster, both branches of the ancient Plantagenet dynasty. The name Wars of the Roses emerged from the white rose, symbolizing the Yorks, and the red rose, representing the Lancastrians. The story began with Henry VI, who ascended to the throne of England as a mere infant in 1422. Henry's reign was marked by political instability and weak leadership. His French queen, Margaret of Anjou, emerged as a strong and ambitious figure, overshadowing her husband. Henry's lack of control led to the loss of English territories in France and widespread lawlessness at home. In 1450, a rebellion erupted, led by Jack Cade, demanding reforms and the return of Richard, Duke of York, from Ireland. Richard had a competing claim to the throne as a descendant of King Edward III. Although Henry quelled the rebellion, he suspected Richard's involvement, setting the stage for a fierce rivalry between the Yorks and Lancasters that would span 3 generations. In 1452, Richard returned to England with the intention of removing corrupt advisors and asserting his influence. He became Lord Protector when Henry fell into madness, but his claim weakened when Queen Margaret gave birth to their son, Edward of Lancaster. In 1455, open conflict erupted at the Battle of St. Albans, where Richard and his ally, the Earl of Warwick, fought against Henry's forces. The Yorks emerged victorious, capturing Henry and assuming control. Margaret and her son were forced into exile. Battles continued to unfold, with the Yorks facing off against the Lancastrians. At the Battle of Blore Heath in 1459, the Yorks, led by Lord Salisbury, defeated Margaret's army despite being outnumbered. The Battle of Ludford Bridge and the Battle of Northampton followed, with the Yorks experiencing both losses and victories. In 1460, Warwick entered London with a sizable force, confronting Henry's army. In a surprising turn of events, a Lancastrian commander betrayed Henry, leading to a York victory and the capture of the king. The Wars of the Roses witnessed a tumultuous power struggle, with Henry VI and Margaret fighting to regain control, while the Yorks sought to secure their position. The conflicts would ultimately shape the destiny of England and give rise to a new royal dynasty. Number 1. The Alhamra Decree. In 1492, the rulers of Spain, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, made a decision that changed the lives of Jewish people in their kingdom. They ordered all Jews to leave Spain or convert to Catholicism. This meant that within a few months, hundreds of thousands of Jews had to give up their homes and belongings and leave their country. The king and queen wrote a letter to their agent, Rodrigo de Mercado, about what to do with the property that belonged to the Jews. They wanted to know which goods were taken from the Jews and how much money they owed to others. The expulsion of the Jews caused a lot of problems. The 4-month deadline to sell their property was too short, and they couldn't get a fair price for their belongings because so many people were selling at the same time. The Jews were also not allowed to have gold and silver, which made it harder for them to settle their debts. This letter told the agent to stop taking the Jews' property in their towns, but to seize anything they had outside of their towns. The measures taken by the king and queen didn't work well, and the Spanish economy suffered. Spain lost many skilled and talented Jewish people, and important centers of Jewish life, like Toledo, were destroyed. Many Jews left Spain and went to other countries, where they contributed to those places instead of Spain. In the end, 175,000 Jews left Spain, and those who stayed had to give up their religion. The Jewish community in Spain was almost completely wiped out for several hundred years. This letter tells the story of a tragic event in Jewish history, but it also shows how the Jewish people spread their culture and ideas around the world. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.